Hello, and thanks for joining Google Cloud Security Talks. My name is Ansh Patnaik, and I'm part of the Google Cloud Security Business Unit, focused on its security analytics platform called Chronicle. In today's keynote session, we announced the availability of a powerful new rules engine called Chronicle Detect. If you're new to Chronicle, take a look at the previous session, which includes an overview and a live demo of Chronicle Detect. In this session, we're fortunate to have three Chronicle customers joining us for a panel discussion about their journey with Chronicle. Joining us today are Matt Svensson from Better Cloud, Ryan Ogden from Groupon, and Sean Doyle from Paradigm Quest. Matt, Ryan, and Sean, welcome and thanks for participating in Google Cloud Security Talks. Why don't we start by learning a little bit about the organizations that each of you work for, as well as your role there. And let me turn it over to you, Matt, to get started, and maybe we can go to Ryan next.
Thanks, Anj. My name is Matt Svensson. I'm a senior security engineer with Better Cloud, who's the first all-in-one platform that lets you detect, manage, and secure all the SaaS applications in your environment. Specifically, I'm responsible for managing the security logging, alerting, and alert triage.
Ryan?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Ryan Ogden, and I'm a senior manager for information security at Groupon. For those who don't know Groupon, we're a global e-commerce company across North America, EMEA, and APAC regions, offering discounts and deals on everything from travel to local experiences and merchandise goods. I've been here for about 8 years, and my focus is mostly around all of the infrastructure security components. That's network security, endpoint security, vulnerability platform, as well as threat response and threat detect.
And hi, I'm Sean Doyle. I'm with Paradigm Quest. We are a business process outsourcing company operating in the Canadian mortgage industry. I'm the senior security lead with Paradigm. I spend much of my day reviewing our threat feeds, looking at where the company is being attacked and the current threats facing the organization, and assign remediations as needed.
Great. Thank you all for that introduction. A useful thing for attendees to hear at the beginning, I think, would be some of the security concerns that you have based on the nature of your business and your organization, also based on the industry that you're in. In other words, the types of security threats or broader security challenges that you're most concerned about. Matt, why don't I turn it back to you to maybe get started and we can hit the same order.
Absolutely, thanks. So really three key areas for us. The first is protecting our platform through which our clients manage their SaaS applications. The second one would be protecting the endpoints. And the third would be kind of integrated into that, continuing to gain visibility into those different environments.
Ryan?
Yeah, so the areas of concern that my team is most focused on is lateral movement, endpoint detect, endpoint malware, things of that nature they're going to come off most of the users for the company. And then business email compromise is obviously another big vector. The third one, if I was going to say more holistically for the company, would be front door bot management, bot protections for the product itself, but we don't use Chronicle for those uses. So everything is mostly focused around employee use and our contractors that are working with us. So endpoint protect, anything coming in through an email that could potentially give harm or give somebody a backdoor to come in. That's our two biggest focuses right now.
From a Paradigm point of view, it's quite similar to Ryan's comments. We focus heavily on the endpoints with the amount of emails coming in and the processing that's done through them. So we have a large concern about malware and phishing threats coming in. We also keep a keen eye on our processing tools where multiple vendors or customers might submit through those platforms. So we try and keep an eye on the front door of what's coming in at all points.
Great. Yeah, the reason I think this is really useful is we're going to have large number of attendees watching these sessions, and they're going to come from different sectors. And while there are some similarities across the things that your three organizations care about, there are also some differences. Ryan, as you mentioned, for Groupon, there is the corporate network that you're focusing on with Chronicle, but there's also significant service that you're supporting with something like Groupon that we're all quite familiar with. And one of the key goals is to ensure that the endpoints, which are often the weakest link internally, don't become a conduit for movement into that critical service on the outside as well. So very interesting use cases for sure, and concerns. Um, let's shift to the before state, if you will. The question here really is what led you to evaluate or consider Chronicle? Not necessarily the reasons that you selected Chronicle, we'll go there next, but what was the state you were trying to change when you started looking at Chronicle? What were the fundamental problems that you were trying to change or impact by when you even considered Chronicle? Again, not the reasons you picked Chronicle, but the fundamental security challenges you were trying to address when you considered Chronicle. So again, maybe I could pass it back to you to start with that, Matt.
Sure. The big problem statement that we had was around investigations, that we, like many others, kind of fell into the trouble of having one of two options that we saw: either manage a SIM and deal with the complexity, the management of it, and the cost, or going to each point product and doing investigations for your endpoint logs, doing investigations on your network telemetry, and jumping around tools. And we knew that there was a better way to attack that than one of those two solutions.
Yeah, I would echo a pretty similar story. We were very excuse me, very compartmentalized. Um, we're not a very big security team, but all of the other ancillary engineering and product teams, they have their own stuff as well. So trying to keep a central view of things and do it efficiently and effectively, and whether it's a response scenario and speed is definitely an issue, or it's more of just a go find go find those elements. And you know do we have it all, do we not have it all, do we miss a beat, is something stopped working? It's very taxing, and it was a lot of heavy lifting, using some of the tools that we were using at the time for logging and attempting to do sim like functionality, more or less. It didn't work very well for the small teams that were operating, and it was becoming a lot of overhead. And then a lot of the other same factors too. Storage, we knew we were running into roadblocks with, we had to do the balancing act. Do we want to keep a bunch of data? We have to pay for a lot of storage, or do we want to take the chance that, we have to keep our retention times low without spending more money just to continually store data that may or may not be relevant now? You get past like a 7-day logging threshold and something happens 10 days later, you're kind of in the dark. So we knew there was a problem there we needed to solve.
And Sean.
So we looked at a couple of solutions, and we were having problems with the traditional SIM implementations. They were quite big, cumbersome. They were usually on premises, and the amount of work that had to go into the maintenance of those platforms was too much for a small team in our instance to manage. So we were looking for something that could take data feeds from multiple sources, that was not linked to any specific ecosystem or platform, where we could correlate that data, and something that could take a lot of volume as well. So we didn't have to worry about the amount of streams we had coming in. We could just point it at a platform and the data would be ingested. And we were finding that very difficult to identify post Chronicle.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm not surprised that there is a common set of themes for the before state across all three of your organizations. That seems to be a consistent reason for why most of our customers have invested in Chronicle. I look back to other security analytics solutions that I've worked on over the years. And one of the basic challenges is quite simply that over the years, organizations have invested in new and better technologies. And one of the things they bring to the table is richer and deeper telemetry to help detect, investigate, triage, hunt. But more telemetry also comes with the need for more storage. And if you're doing all of this on premises, as all three of you, I think, alluded to, means managing and scaling the infrastructure under it in order to get the response that you're looking for and to search on it. And in fact, I would contend that for any organization, if you wound the clock back 10 years, even if you were the same size today you might be generating 5 to 10 times that amount of data, just given that you have much richer, deeper telemetry coming out of your endpoint solutions, EDR traffic, or things like emerging XDR solutions that recommend not just that deep endpoint visibility, but also blending that with network traffic. So that is the common set of concerns we hear: the manageability, the overhead of doing this on premises, especially for smaller security teams. We do hear a lot about things like pricing models as well. That's what tends to be one of the reasons. And so, with that, let me pivot over to sort of the reasons for selection. All of you presumably went through some evaluation process with Chronicle, and we're looking to address the challenges that you just talked about. And you probably looked at other options in the market. What were the reasons you eventually selected Chronicle? And turn it over to you, Matt, to comment on that.
The biggest thing was the ease of the investigation, that when an endpoint alert occurred, I could put the host name into Chronicle and get a view of all the network activity, the web proxy, endpoint, vulnerability data for that host, everything I really needed to do a security investigation on that alert in a simplified timeline view. What made it even better is once we got GCP logs ingested into Chronicle as well, Chronicle was the only thing that could do that dynamic host name to IP correlation. As instances spun up and down, there is no way for us to be able to correlate what IP address went to what host name when it was gone 10 minutes ago. So that was really huge for us. A very simple example is we're looking for anomalous outbound activity from our non-prod and prod environments. Saw an alert for a new domain that came up. I was able to put that domain into Chronicle and see a simplified view that 2 SRE members went to that domain on premise, and then it was seen in non-prod. So very easy to put those pieces together and see that that was probably an SRE member testing something. I was able to reach out to them within a minute to minute and a half from the actual alert, and talking with my team, that investigation was done. Anywhere else, that would have been multiple queries for that activity in the on-prem environment, in the GCP environment, trying to manually correlate the host. So it would have taken multiple minutes, probably 5 at least, to do that investigation. In Chronicle, one search, and it was done within a minute and a half.
Yeah, we were in an we were actually in an interesting transition period when this came up. We were POCing some endpoint EDR tools to replace our legacy AV solution, and due to some other circumstances, we also ended up having to POC SIM tools. So we had a lot going on, and we found the EDR tool that we were excited to deploy, and then the Chronicle became kind of a public known name, and I was interested in it, and we were POCing other some like products, and it just so happened that our MSSP FishTech at the time was partnering with the Sideris component, which is who we use for the MSSP SOC functions. They were partnering with Chronicle to move their platform over to Chronicle, and so the timing actually worked out really well in an unusual circumstance for doing 2 massive POCs at the same time. It actually worked out really well. So everything kind of aligned for us. Similar things to what Matt said, right? We previously didn't have any way to efficiently do any sort of correlation across the environment unless we had a team of 5 people or so, and all they did was write correlation rules. And again, that's really response driven. That's you gotta think what you want to look for versus and potentially miss what you don't. So the power with the correlation capabilities was something that we hadn't seen, and it was really good for us because we were also deploying. We had just deployed actually an EDR tool across the board as well. So the timing worked out really well. One of the big things I will say is some of the team members were they were a little hesitant, I'll be honest, and I wasn't sure either, but I liked what I saw. But I think what we realized out of this was we had to kind of rethink, well, I'd probably say simplify the way we approached threat response, hunting, investigations, because we don't need a lot of dashboards, and we certainly don't need a million different notifications for something that could be something, but you don't really know. I'd rather focus stuff on the things that actually are actionable. And I thought Chronicle was really, really good out of the box of just saying, hey, here's a few things that are probably indicative of worth the time to investigate. And that was a huge value for us as well. So single pane of glass, log everything, don't have to think about it anymore, and then quick actions to be taken on stuff that had a higher likelihood of actually being um, being worth investigating, I guess.
Right. Sean?
I think from our point of view, it echoes kind of the sentiments of Ryan and Matthew. When we were looking at the deployment, we were looking for, how simple was it or how much work was required on our part to do deployment. From the Chronicle point of view, that setting up the forwarders was all quite easy. There wasn't too much work that we had to do on our premises side. I like the pricing model of the platform. Some platforms have you pay per gigabyte, where in Chronicle's area we could just send as much data as we want, so we didn't really have to think about how much data is going in, the flow, the volume. We could just point everything at it. So it let me put more typical data you wouldn't even bring into that platform into it because of the pricing structure. And then we also liked how it integrated with some of our other platforms through APIs directly, so the data was just streamed straight in, so the work from there was very, very easy. And one of the main things that we picked the platform then, once we saw everything working, was the speed of the search. So when the data becomes normalized, the searches are almost instant. So we can cross-reference against multiple data sources in a very, very fast speed of time versus having to wait for something to spin up, as we saw on other platforms.
Yeah, that's great. Really great stuff. Yeah, those are definitely tend to be the big ones. I think what's different is that different customers are sensitive to different factors. We talked across the three of you. You talked about the cost factor. Traditional solutions in the log management SIM space tend to charge per gigabyte or based on the number of devices that are sending information, and that's a tax that keeps growing. So changing that was certainly a disruptive factor and entry opportunity for us. There's absolutely the search performance piece in bringing sort of the Google search speed element to it. For large customers, certainly the scale of this is critical. For smaller ones, mid-sized companies, just not having to worry about the SaaS delivery model and not having to worry about the management of things at the back end, which just keeps growing and growing, is a big one. So certainly cost, performance, scale, and then sort of the curation that we do. I want to hit on things that each of you said though to highlight a couple of things. Um, Matt talked about a very interesting use case that we're seeing more and more customers engage on, and that is around expanding from corporate security telemetry, which is certainly where we started, and looking at also production telemetry. In the case of Better Cloud, production workloads sitting in Google Cloud, and extending the power of investigation and hunting against data and telemetry coming from Google Cloud, and having that accessible with with the speed that we offer, and with the full year of retention, especially for those fleeting instances in the cloud, and is certainly applicable for other cloud environments as well. So a very unique use case that we're seeing more pickup on, especially now. But Ryan also touched on another one, which is a critical one for us. From the outset, one of the launch of Chronicle, one of the areas where we've had a lot of traction is with managed services providers, because what we become is sort of an effective back end to power investigations and hunts for managed services providers that can then be the findings, the automated detections, and the correlation of IOCs to telemetry can then be piped into the front end of the managed services providers, and that's exactly what one of our very strategic partners, Fistech, and its managed services arm, Sideris, has done. And in fact, in their case, they've augmented Chronicle with additional capabilities around orchestration, compliance reporting, and more in a parallel stack in GCP. So it's a really tightly integrated solution that gives especially customers that are looking for additional services to augment and build out their core SOC capabilities a great option. So really interesting stuff on why you guys selected Chronicle. So eventually, you must have all selected, clearly all selected Chronicle, and we appreciate that you've been, you've been part of the Chronicle journey in the case of some of you for a very long time. Ryan, in your case, you talked about the initial the hesitance as well. And we're very comfortable with you bringing it up because you guys were a very early adopter. We were talking to you a long time ago as we launched, and we were very focused on a set of capabilities. And to your point, the initial focus was on, we're not going to repeat what the world has already delivered, which is a whole bunch of dashboards that don't necessarily point to something that's a known bad. Let's focus on having more fine-tuned detections and pre-correlated enrichment of data that can then be used to more quickly get to real threats. And all three of you have been sort of active customers in terms of usage, as well as sort of engagement and feedback with our customer success team. Can you each talk about just maybe a couple of what would be the summary outcomes that you've achieved with Chronicle? I think you've hinted on it with the last question as well. But if you were to hit sort of the one or two things, not in terms of the driver, like speed is a good thing, good example of that. But what's the outcome that you've realized with, or metric that you were hoping to impact that you've been able to with Chronicle? Matt, maybe you can kick that off.
Absolutely. So we actually got a little frustrated where we were bouncing around tools, SIM solutions weren't working, that we literally started to time how long investigations would take, how long looking up the host network traffic, looking up the prevalence of that domain, who else had touched it, what the threat intel was for the domain, what the endpoint data were. And all said and done, an investigation would take upwards of about 10 minutes if an EDR event hit, and we would have to dig into every single telemetry source to really do a complete investigation. In Chronicle, it's taking that host name, doing one search, and looking at a simplified timeline view with all those data together. So that took us from a 10-minute investigation to really minute, maybe even sometimes sub-minute investigations.
Great. That's a great sort of 10x gain. It's excellent. Ryan.
Yeah, so like the single, the phrase that's commonly thrown around, the single pane of glass thing, right? We ended up being able to get that, as you mentioned, or we were already partnered with FishTech and the managed services Sideris component for that feature, right? We were already using them, and so it was a natural evolution, I guess. We didn't want to stand up something and then have an MSSP also using something else, and now we got to duplicate everything. So being able to use one backend that we share sped up not just the standing up log collections, standing up visibility, standing up response. All of that stuff was already done because everybody was working in the same space, and we prior hadn't really merged log log collection sourcing between the environments, the infrastructure, office infrastructure environments, and then the production data center environments, and there was a gap there. So now we're able to dump all of that, not worry about all of retention time, not worry about ingestion rates, things like that. So the ability to look at the traffic patterns between like an endpoint or a user's activity or possibly a public IP, that gave us like instant view of what's going on. And when we introduced the EDR component to the environment, then we were able to take it to that next level and not just investigate natively in that tool. We can go over to Chronicle and say, what else is going on? What's the rest of the picture that needs painted? And kind of to Matt's point, a couple minutes and you're done. There's no presumption, there's no guesswork, there's no needing to reach out and wait a day kind of a stuff. You're instantly empowered to have a shot at making a good data-driven decision. And so we saw the value almost instantly. because we didn't have to think about all the heavy lifting for standing up new tools and standing up boxes and things like that. You just put the forwarder up, add a new port, and you're off and running and you're done. So it's almost a nice complement between what our team is doing internally and then what our managed services provider, Sideris, is doing as well. Is we're all seeing the same pane of glass. We're seeing the same data. They're seeing the same endpoint data. They're seeing what else users are doing, user activity being correlated over to host activity in the data centers, like that we previously didn't have that correlation around. So we're able to identify, fortunately, a lot of false positives that prior would even go undetected, or kind of what Matt's saying, would take hours, maybe days, to try to even paint the picture. So the guesswork is out the window, and you can have better conversations and go directly to teams with actionable data, as opposed to, hey, I got to set up a time, I got to call, we got to talk tomorrow, that kind of stuff. The delay was gone. So that was a huge value add for us.
Excellent. Sean?
I think to echo the comments of the others, we have seen a reduction in the mean time to detect from our point of view. When we have a small team, that number matters a lot. You have to spread your time, adequately across all the areas. So it helps us get more done faster during our day as a whole. We like the usage of the data normalization that we're seeing, multiple curated views. So, we have user views where we can see someone's machine logging in from a certain IP address. We can see the user login event from whatever address. We can see the MFA event. So we can step through, so much data so fast. And our ability to classify something as a false positive is significantly faster now because we have all that data instantly popping up for us.
Great. Uh, really great narratives on the journey with Chronicle thus far. Today, we announced the availability of Chronicle Detect. In fact, in the session right before this, we just went through the capabilities in detail, did a live demo. Um, Two of you have been sort of early access partners and close to the evolution of the rules engine. This is sort of a closing out question. And you've worked closely with our engineering customer success teams in doing that, helping us get to this launch today. And I was hoping you could share a little about that experience with the Chronicle team and the evolution of the rules engine capabilities, and then sort of wrap up and close out. I'm actually going to flip this one and go to Ryan. Ryan, I realize you guys were not part of the EAP, but you've been a very long-term customer, right from sort of the pilot phase almost. Can you wrap up by just sort of talking about your journey with Chronicle a little bit, and just your thoughts on our expansion into detection? Again, acknowledging that you weren't part of the EAB program, but just commenting on the vision, and if you could wrap on that, and we'll pass it over to the others.
Yeah, happy to. So, like I said kind of earlier, when we entered into that partnership with Chronicle, like, it was also through Sideris and FishTech. So we knew we were in the right spot. We also knew that Chronicle was just getting started, and the enterprise space is a challenging space for anybody that's new. So we knew there were some limitations that maybe wouldn't have been an out of the box tool, and that's fine. And like I said, we had to rethink the way we approached some of this stuff, which was actually a good thing. It helped us simplify again. And so I knew, and I think we all knew, they would get where everybody wants somebody to be, that we saw the possibilities, we saw the potential, we knew that the talent was there, and we knew that the momentum was going to build really quickly. Um, so anything that we would have seen as maybe a gap on some sort of a POC analysis, I knew would be covered eventually. And then, I mean, we haven't even been in the relationship for 2 years, and a lot of it has already been done. So I knew it was only a matter of time. So I'm pretty excited to see what's coming down the pipeline. I'm excited for the Chronicle Detect capability. I think it's a good direction for Chronicle to extend some of those customization capabilities to customers. I mean, we all have our own unique scenarios, but we all have very, very similar scenarios as well. So still leveraging the simplification, the AI power, the machine learning, all of that stuff is still going to stay there. And then adding on, customers to be able to work on their own, a little more unique situational stuff. It's a great add, and I'm excited to see what comes after that.
Great, Ryan. Thank you. We really appreciate Groupon's partnership. Sean, let me actually turn it over to you next. If you can comment a little bit about your experience with the rules engine
Mhm.
and what you've seen, and then sort of close out with sort of your overall thoughts of the journey so far and looking forward, and then we'll turn it over to Matt.
Sure. Well, when we heard we were moving towards the rules detect side of things, we were delighted to see what was happening, and saw it as the kind of next logical step for the platform and the functionality that needed to be added. It's allowing us to do a lot more now in terms of seeing what's more anomalous on our network versus the whole reaction way we were previously, and we're seeing some extra functionality that we didn't even plan on. We were able to see now assets on the network that weren't identified before, so we're able to set up rules to identify things that you normally just wouldn't even have picked up, because we can craft specific rules for specific things that we want to see. So we're finding that we're getting even more of a benefit now that the platform has this ability, and we're very much excited to see where it goes. But it's been a great experience so far. The platform has been steadily growing over the last couple of months and years. So it's a great space to be in, and we're happy to be a part of it.
Great. Thank you, Sean. It's great to partner with you as well. Matt, I'll let you close it out. You've probably been one of the closest collaborators with us during the early access program for Chronicle Detect. If you could close out with your thoughts on that and your overall journey, that would be a great close to the session.
Sure. So this is my first time doing an EAP, which has been a lot of fun and exciting. That working with the front end actual developers doing the coding up through the product management teams looking strategically at how Chronicle Detect would be seen in a year and 2 years. So having that entire scope of input was really helpful. The first thing that really stood out was the API centric approach, that we have a lot of pipelines that we have for infrastructure as code, for some of the ways and processes that we want to have our alerts set up. And the APIs allow that. They allow us to integrate directly with the architecture we already have. The second thing is I can create dynamic rules through these APIs from internal threat intel feeds or external ones. However I want to create my alerts, I can. I guess the second thing that really kind of stood out was going back to the speed. It would take about 3 to 4 minutes for an alert from the time of activity to the alert being generated. Going back to us liking to time things from a host activity, a user addition, a set of failed logins, we're seeing 30 seconds to the alert actually being generated within Chronicle. So that time can be huge with malicious activity. If you can catch that in 30 seconds versus multiple minutes, that can be night and day. It's going back to what Ryan said on simplification. We wanted to first have a platform that we could do investigations in, and we got that. Adding in the alerting capability simplifies it that much more, where now the platform that I can get my alerts in, I can quickly pivot, and that's the same platform I use to do my investigation.
Matt, Ryan, Sean, a huge thanks to the three of you and your organizations for participating in Google Cloud Security Talks. That was a really great walkthrough of what led you to invest and partner with Google Chronicle, as well as the journey with Chronicle leading up to our key announcement today. That concludes this session. A huge thanks and goodbye from all of us.
Thank you.
Thank you.